Hi everyone.
Hey, Maggie.
Hi. I'm Maggie, and I've been going to this church ever since I was little. I went to preschool here. My parents taught Sunday school. My brother's now the youth group pastor. I was a camper and a counselor at Summer's Best. I went to youth group. I've gone on mission trips to Costa Rica and Mexico, through our church. And I grew up knowing God. I didn't have a huge, breakthrough moment where God came into my life. He was always there. But despite learning about God, being surrounded by a family who always strive to improve their relationships with God, I had massive misunderstandings about how God wants me to live my life as a Christian. So I had a super normal childhood, obviously filled with a lot of animals. I'm putting all these pictures up here because this gets sad at some parts, so if you get sad, go look at the animals. It always helps me. Had a super normal childhood, great family, great friends. Everything was easy and everything felt safe. I loved elementary school. I had an early interest in art. I was always extremely self-aware at a young age, and I always had a drive to improve myself. But I really hated making mistakes, and I cared a lot about how I treated others and how others perceived me. So much so that I took grounding into my own hands at a very young age. Kind of awesome for parents, but a little weird. So there was this one time I felt so bad about being mean to my brother. It was something about like I touched his stuff and he didn't want me to touch his stuff, or he touched things in my room and I was mad. And I just felt horrible. I got into a fight with him. I think I was like 4 or 5. I don't even remember what it was about. But I felt so bad that I went up into my room to ground myself, and I wrote out 100 times. Or not 100. I don't think I could even count to that one. But I wrote out as many times as I could. I will not fight with my brother. It was Zach.
Couldn't be.
So I wrote this list, and no one had told me to do it. And it came around dinner time, and my parents called up the stairs, and I came out of my room. I probably had the list in my hand, and I was crying. And, they were kind of confused, like, you're not in trouble. Why are you in your room? I was like, because I did something bad. I have to, I have to serve my time for it. And they're like, all right, I mean, we're not mad at you, so you're all right. And they forgave me really quickly. But I just had this drive inside of me just to kind of, I always felt like if I didn't serve my time, then, the lesson wouldn't be learned. That I could get out of control and do something bad if I don't, be hard on myself. And the self-disciplining kind of continued throughout elementary school. I refused to let my parents help me with my homework or give me ideas for projects because that was cheating in any way. And it just absolutely ruined my day if they even suggested anything for my projects. But I really loved my time in elementary school, despite my nitpickiness on my own mistakes. I had great friends. I could be creative every day. I felt I was the queen of recess. I don't know if that was accurate or not. I was social, and I felt so loved and supported by my school. Then it came time for middle school, everyone's favorite time. I went into 6th grade all excited to meet new people. The middle school in West Mifflin is where all 4 elementary schools, I think there's only 3 now, and mine was the one that got deleted, but I loved it. So they all converged together into one school. And I had the old middle school. I didn't have the new fancy one you guys have now. I got all new clothes, and I was excited. I was finally going to start matching my clothes because all 5th grade I wore sweatpants and these 2 Christmas shirts that I had. So the first week of school, the excitement quickly faded. I saw an ambulance at our school almost every day of the first week from all the fights breaking out. A lot of kids couldn't handle being put with all these new children, so they fought each other. One fight was so bad that they shut down a whole hallway because a kid's head had been smashed so hard against the wall that it got blood all over the lockers. I was absolutely horrified. I was in an environment totally different than what I was used to. I thought most people were good, and it didn't make sense that, I was hearing about kids doing drugs, getting pregnant, somehow getting drunk at 12 and 13. I couldn't even understand it. I felt very, very afraid and very out of control. The old kind of worries came back, like, what if I made these mistakes too? How can I prevent myself from doing this? And I couldn't handle having that guilt if I were to make such mistakes. So I stayed close to the friends I had. I did not make any new ones. And I shut down and kind of was no longer social. I was in an environment where I had no influence over people and their actions, and I was totally out of control, and a fog began creeping into my life in 7th grade. This is where the animal pictures, you can look at them if it's sad. It was this fog that seemed to coat my world in darkness. Everything felt terrifying. It was kind of, if any of you have seen Stranger Things when he goes into the Upside Down, that's kind of what my world seemed to turn into. I felt guilty all the time, and I couldn't figure out why. I didn't think I did anything wrong. Why do I feel guilty? Social interactions just became stressful. I didn't want to do anything wrong. I felt alone, and everyone seemed scary and mean. My own friends were becoming catty. That happens in middle school, and I felt pressure to do the same. I didn't like who I was or what I looked like. I started to critique myself even more, just to find a place for this guilty feeling that seemed to be building inside me. There had to be a reason I felt guilty. The fear that was building compelled me to cleanse my life so that maybe I could feel better. Maybe I could get rid of this feeling. So what happened is I began avoiding things that seemed scary to me or, had some sort of bad juju on it like I felt it was. They seemed as a threat to me, and my world was under attack. Food choices began to get kind of weird. One choice could have something good happen and one could have something bad happen in my mind. The next came hand washing to, cleanse the bad things that were happening around me, to get rid of them off my body. And then came the throwing away of notebooks and clothes and rewriting things that just didn't feel right to me. I started doing bad in school, and I've never done bad. I actually got an F on a halfway through report card in algebra. And I just began developing these extremely irrational fears that seemed so important to me, and they felt in my control. My parents began to notice the behavior, and we figured out that I was suffering from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Those of you that don't know what OCD is, I'm going to give you the medical definition here. OCD is an anxiety disorder in which people have unwanted and repeated thoughts, feelings and images and sensations that they engage in behaviors or mental acts in response to these to protect themselves. Often the person carries out the behaviors to reduce the impact and get rid of the obsessive thoughts. They think, if I just do this one thing, it'll make this thought go away. But it doesn't help. It just keeps it going, and it feeds it. And your brain kind of gets stuck in this track that it's already in because of a chemical imbalance that you have no control of. And just knowing what this illness was helped a bit, but it didn't solve the problem. My compulsions became so frequent that my friends began noticing. I didn't feel safe to tell them, though, what was wrong, because I thought I'd be pushed out of the group. They were judging people for what they were wearing. How could I say, hey, I can't eat this food today because I'm trying to protect the world here. I can't eat it. And it was hard, so I lied. I just kept lying about what I was doing. And my world started becoming smaller. I was afraid of more things. I only wore a couple outfits because they seemed safe, and maybe a good day happened when I wore this one, so I'll wear it. It was kind of like good luck charms, just to have some sense of control and feel safe again. And I confided in my parents, and I swore them to secrecy, and I refused to see a therapist because I thought, that's too embarrassing. I was so ashamed, and I wasn't normal like everyone else, and I felt horrible for hurting so many people with how miserable I was. I couldn't see this as a sickness or an illness. I saw it as only I did something wrong, so I'm being punished. This is how this works. After a year of struggling, the compulsions went away and the constant fears subsided, but the shame and guilt and self-consciousness stayed. This year of sickness really shook me. I was angry, and I figured God had given me a broken brain, and I couldn't see myself ever trusting my own thoughts again. My own brain had betrayed me, and I couldn't forgive myself for it. This lack of understanding and compassion for myself resulted in more self-criticism. I wanted to make sure that I could never get so out of control again. So I kept tight restrictions on myself of how much I let my feelings show, how much I revealed to my friends. And I often kind of didn't believe my own feelings. They felt invalid because they were produced by a broken brain. How could I even engage with them? I became sort of a pushover in my personality, much different from what I had grown up like. I would easily get guilted into things when it came to my friends. And this is where the misunderstanding of Scripture and what it means to be a Christian kind of came into play. In Matthew 5:39-40, "But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, hand over your coat as well." Now, Jesus had intended this verse to be a lesson in revenge seeking. He did not want us to return misdeeds with more misdeeds, and that the Christian way to handle this would be to return fire with kindness and not payback. I didn't interpret the verse this way. To me, this meant, in order to be a good Christian, I should never fight back when I am not treated right. I saw any conflict as bad, like that was me being mean to stick up for myself in any way. The other verse I misinterpreted was Mark 12:30-31. "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." I knew I had to love other people no matter what, and I tried really hard to do this. But the part I didn't understand for the longest time is that in order to love other people as yourself, you must also love yourself. And I think a lot of people tend to forget that part. At that time in high school, I did not love myself. I felt I had nothing good to say, and I felt really intimidated by everyone. I had a group of friends that, I'd had since elementary school, and I stuck to it. And I was very, very bitter in high school. I didn't feel supported at all by my teachers, and there seemed to be a favoritism or a way to succeed that I was not included in. I resented all the security measures I had to go through every day. Each morning I walked into school, I waited in line to be metal detected, and then randomly wanded, and every day I carried my heavy books in a pile in my arms because we weren't allowed to carry backpacks. It kind of led me into the whole thing again that the world is just scary. My friends were bitter just like me, and we all sort of had this low self-esteem, but we weren't exactly trying to help each other get out of it. We mostly just joked about it and wallowed in it, and it kind of played into our sense of humor. I only dated one person in high school. I found that I wasn't getting the love that I expected, and instead of bringing it up, because that's conflict is bad, that would be mean, and I didn't want to be a nagging girlfriend, but something just, I wasn't receiving the love I thought. But it ended up resulting in me working really hard to make myself better, as I'd always done, more attractive. I can fix this lack of connection and support that I wasn't getting. And I used to run all the time. I slimmed down to look good. I dressed really nice, and still, it didn't feel like what I thought. I thought I could critique myself enough into becoming someone that this person could really appreciate. And I found I did that with a lot of my friends. I thought, just keep working harder, and, you'll receive that love back. But this isn't how life works. I needed to see myself as enough and not look at gratification in other people. Towards the end of high school, I was really ready to leave. I felt so unfulfilled and trapped, and I had been dreaming about college ever since my brothers went. I even bought stuff at flea markets for my future dorm in 10th grade. I wanted to go. And, maybe I could start over. I'm going into a place where people don't know me. They wouldn't know how intimidated I had been all my life. I could just be who I wanted to be. I decided to go to Kent State in Ohio for graphic design. It was the best decision I ever made. I was immediately best friends with my roommate, who turned out to live 20 minutes from my home in Pittsburgh. We both were weird and messy and had the same exact sense of humor. I think we bonded. We both ate salt and vinegar chips all the time, and we sat in the quad and just split a whole bag of chips together. We made a huge group of friends that all lived in the dorm, and we had fun constantly, despite the massive amounts of homework and all the awful food we ate. I thought this was my reward for putting up with everything I went through in middle school and high school, and I began to look at my life differently. I no longer thought that God had cursed me with that illness because I got my self-esteem back. It was gone. Maybe I would never feel that fear again. I finally understood the love your neighbor as yourself. I had been beating myself up for years because of that feeling of guilt that was in the pit of my stomach, but it was no longer there. And I realized in relationships with people, if you treat yourself right, you're going to treat other people right too. And together, you all just treat each other in the way that you're supposed to. I was surrounded by a wonderful and supportive group of friends who encouraged me to love myself, and I did the same for them. I had begun dating Justin, who I still date now 5 years later, and he treated me the way I thought a boyfriend should treat someone. And he was friends with all my friends. It was so perfect. I figured I had life figured out. All that bad was behind me, and I was set for good. I understood life. I thanked God over and over again in my head for how great everything was. I finally felt like myself again, and I was strong, and I was in a really good place with all the people around me. We could talk to each other about everything, our feelings, our religion, and everybody supported each other. Freshman year went by, and I made it through the first rounds of cuts in my major, and I came back sophomore year to all my friends in the same roommate. My program in graphic design was beginning to get intense, but I was just so happy I really didn't care. I would pull all-nighters so much to try to make up for all the workload I had. And I was pretty used to the lack of sleep. That summer I had worked 2 jobs, and one of them started at 5 a.m. packing a truck for Michael's, and then the other one started at 5 p.m. and ended at 10 p.m. at Dairy Queen. But I handled it, I felt I could take all this work on, and I piled it on. I worked jobs, I kept up with my major, I completed my major actually in a time that was less than it should have taken, because I could handle it. And there is a triangle of balance in college that has 3 sides, but you only have time for 2 of them. There's school, your social life, and your health. I picked school and social life. My health went down the drain, but I was still having an awesome time. One day, sophomore year, it was in September, it was a really nice day. I went to a football game. This was one of 3 total I attended out of the 4 years of being there. I was sitting in the stands chatting with my friends because I didn't really know what was happening. And all of a sudden, this just horrible feeling came over me. My chest got tight, and I felt like I was going to throw up. And the world just seemed to spin too fast. I rode the bus back to my dorm and collapsed in my bed crying hysterically. It felt like I was actually dying. I called my mom under the impression that this might be the last time I talked to her, before I inevitably die from feeling so awful. We figured out, after some debate, that I was having a panic attack, which I had never had before. And it just rocked my world. It took me back to, where I was in 7th grade, feeling so afraid again. And how could I feel so afraid when my life is so awesome? Like, life sucked back then. That made sense why I felt awful. Why do I feel awful now? I began cleansing again. Just things didn't feel right, so I thought, okay, I'll get rid of stuff in my life, and then things will feel good again. Maybe God's punishing me for, drinking too much last year. I don't know. I got to figure this out. I got to solve this problem. So people started seeming scary, and I couldn't feel the love that I felt for everybody anymore. I actually broke up with my boyfriend because there was no room in my heart for love. The butterfly feeling had gone, and it was so sudden. And it was replaced with fear. I could not figure out what was happening. It was the fog. The fog was there, and it was covering my great life and obscuring it in my mind. I was crying all the time again and not eating because I felt just so worried. Everything tasted awful. You know, Justin and I did get back together after it was only a week of time. And he helped me realize that I was suffering from anxiety. I didn't really know what this was, and no one had really talked to me outside of my parents about any type of mental illness. But he explained that, you know, his sister had such bad anxiety that she stopped going to school in high school. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't think anybody else had these problems. I thought it was just, you know, me. And once again, though, I was mad at God. I just thought, like, come on, you gave me one perfect year, and you're taking it away from me again. Like, I guess I really do deserve nothing. You know, maybe I was right. Luckily, though, my friends were amazing through this whole time. And I could actually talk about this illness and what was happening, and they understood, and they didn't ditch me like I thought would happen. For a whole year, I woke up every day feeling like there was no ground beneath me. Once again, I blamed myself for this problem, and I thought I was cursed, but it was just a chemical imbalance. After a year of this intense fear, the compulsions came back. The OCD was in full force, and my world kept getting smaller and smaller. It had affected religion in a way that, you know, I felt I couldn't even touch the Bible because, you know, my badness that's inside of me would get to it, and it would taint it somehow. You know, food was hard to pick. It seemed like a life or death choice. You know, the way OCD works is you kind of just get these thoughts and feelings about stuff being bad and you act on them. So food choices went away. Picking places to go went away. Driving was hard. And the last thing to go was, you know, one of my favorite things, which was drawing. All of a sudden, every line I made seemed to have a consequence to it. And it was hard because that's my major, you know, I can't just fail school because of this problem. But I refused to get help for a long time. I just thought it would go away if I just ignored it. But, you know, that's not how things work either. And my friends eventually convinced me to go to a therapist. But I really didn't find relief until after I graduated college. You know, college was still great, still awesome. It was kind of weird because the world inside of me was crumbling, but I had all these wonderful people around me. So I had to sort of reframe my way of thinking because even though my world seemed to change, nothing else did. God was still there for me. My family was still great. My friends were still great. I just, inside, I couldn't feel it. And I held them as an anchor that, you know, this life is still okay, even though I'm not. I'll hold on to this. And I no longer blamed God for what was happening. I began to understand that this was just an illness, and it wasn't my fault, and it wasn't anyone else's. And that life is not a straight line. It ebbs, and it flows, and it's good and it's bad. And there is no use trying to control that all by ourselves. I ended up seeing 3 different therapists, and only in the past couple months, you know, I found one that worked. And we're working on my fears. We're working on the compulsions. I'm facing the fears every day and learning to let go of that control that I thought that I had over life. For a long time, I denied God's mercy for me. I know Jesus died to forgive my sins. I learned this all the time. I could recite the verses. But I felt for the longest time that I did not deserve this mercy. This solution just felt too easy. And, you know, this guilt that kept hanging around me for any bad things I did, I would just go over it and over it again in my head. And I restricted myself from fun things because I felt that I didn't deserve it. And if I felt I didn't deserve something, I would deny myself of it. This went into the thinking that I needed total control over myself and my world. I was so afraid of somehow getting out of control and becoming an awful person all of a sudden that I was basically saying to myself, thanks God for forgiving me. I know you did, but I feel I won't learn if I don't beat myself up about this for a while. And I'm going to turn down any blessings you give me in life because I feel bad about what I did, and I got to serve my time, even though you sent your son to die for me so that I didn't have to serve time. I didn't come to this conclusion on what I was doing until recently. And I've begun to realize that I was literally turning down God's gifts for years. I heard God's message all my life, but I just wasn't acting on it. I just thought it applied to everyone else and, for some reason, not me. I set an impossible standard in life, and I came to realize that in reality, I am not in charge of determining what I deserve. None of us are. In reality, we don't deserve anything. We had fallen from, the garden in the beginning. But God still gives us everything. And this is God's job to determine what I deserve. And life is scary and ever-changing, but God gave us all the tools to take that on. And I always kind of figured that, if I did something bad, then punishment would come along, but sometimes that's not it. And I recently read a verse, Psalm 103:10. He does not treat us as our sins deserve, or repay us according to our iniquities. For as high as the heavens are above the earth, so great is his love for those who fear him. So the whole time, I was judging myself, and the only judge I should worry about is God. And I wish I had realized this early in life, but it makes for a good lesson to learn. And just know that God gave us all the tools to handle what he throws at us, and he gave us people that are there to help us, and it's okay to ask for help. So, that's it.
Oh, thanks.